And we're back. Okay, let's look on page 212 here. And we see a rat farm, or it's a chicken farm actually. It looks like rat. It's here, but it's a chicken farm. Okay, and this is going to be an issue here that is unfortunately very relevant right now. Or not relevant immediately, but it will be in a few months' time. And that an issue is antibiotic resistance. Okay, basically, if you've ever been on antibiotics, they always have that little label on the bottle that says, finish all of this unless directed by a doctor. And the reason why they tell you to do that is that, okay, you have a 7-day prescription of antibiotics. Okay, you start feeling better after 3 days. You stop taking it. Okay, if you've killed off every bacterium that is in your body, good. Okay, but if you haven't, then all you've done is you've killed off all the bacteria that are going to be killed off by a 3-day course of antibiotics. So now the only ones that are left reproducing are the ones that can handle the 3 days of antibiotics. So what you've just done is you've made the bacteria population stronger. Okay, that's why. Okay, it used to be there penicillin would clear just about anything up, but after a while that stuff stopped working. Okay, so they had to get stronger and stronger and stronger antibiotics. Guys, understand antibiotics. Okay, antibiotic against life. These things are things that will wipe out pretty much anything. They don't just discriminate against bacteria. They are harmful. And so they're having to get progressively more harmful. Okay, to the point where now, there are some of the bacteria, some of the antibiotics that they give you are pretty nasty things. Okay, your fluoroquinones, for example. A few years back, I had a pretty nasty case of pneumonia. And it took me 4 rounds of antibiotics for that. They put me on, I can't remember what the first couple were, but they put me on them and didn't do much of anything. So finally, they had to put me on this stuff called Levaquin. And I had to have 2 rounds of that. And I didn't realize just how sick I was until when I mentioned to the pharmacist that, yeah, this was my second round of Levaquin, her eyes did, and she backed away slowly. And it was at that point when I realized just how sick I was. And that was not a pleasant thing. And you look at this Levaquin, and it's got 4 warning labels on there. There's the finish all this except as directed. There's a warning on there about how, it might give you nausea and all that good stuff. And then there's another warning that says, stay out of direct sunlight. Really? Do not taunt the antibiotic, was probably on there somewhere. But they also had this one on there that said that this may cause your tendons to rupture. What? May cause your tendons to rupture. I found out that this could happen decades after the fact, so just waiting for the day I'm going to be going about my business, and my Achilles is going to rupture. Lovely. This is where we are. And the reason why we have to keep getting these stronger and stronger antibiotics is because the bacteria are evolving resistance. And part of this, guys, is going to happen naturally. Okay? Under ideal circumstances, bacteria can completely double their population every 20 minutes. Okay, now that's under laboratory conditions. But even under real world conditions, you could, in some cases, be looking at every 60 minutes. So sooner or later, just through the process of mutation, which is going to lead to something beneficial, and that's going to trigger natural selection, over time you are going to get bacterial resistance. But guys, we do not need to be speeding that along by doing stupid things. Okay, if you're given antibiotics, don't decide because you're feeling better after 3 days that you can skip taking them. You can't finish your antibiotics. Okay, don't take antibiotics if you don't have a bacterial infection. They used to, back when I was a kid, back in the 80s, they would give, if you go into the doctor with a cold, they would give you some amoxicillin, okay, a really low-grade antibiotic just in case. They don't do that anymore. Excuse me. Now, the reason of that is, again, antibiotic resistance. Okay. Now, the current occupant of the White House He is trying to say that the coronavirus, okay, can be treated with antibiotics. It's resisting the antibiotics. Okay, guys, again, antibiotics don't do anything for viruses. Okay, so again, coronavirus is not going to be affected by antibiotics. Okay, this is why people need to be educated about science. And side note, guys, I understand the urgency at the moment for hand sanitizer, and I fully support using hand sanitizer at this time. But that's it said, however, guys, I am very concerned. Okay, because I have made it a point to not use hand sanitizer in general, because for one thing, and the best way to kill bacteria there is just straight up hand washing. Okay, hand sanitizer helps, but leaves a ridiculous proportion of the bacteria behind. And now with everyone using this hand sanitizer to begin with, all you're going to be doing is just increasing the number of bacteria that can survive the hand sanitizer. So when all this is said and done, I look forward to an outbreak of some sort of bacterial disease. So that's just another fun bonus here. Okay. So now we've got that out of the way. That sort of just tells you here about, one of the issue was of evolution. And that kind of leads us into things like coevolution and the process, and we'll get into this. Okay. Now, alleles. Okay. We've talked about alleles before. Remember, an allele is just a form of a given gene. Okay. And most genes have at least one or two. Most genes are going to have at least two alleles for a given trait. This could be like, you have brown eyes, or you can have blue eyes. You have an allele for either of them. There, some of them have multiple alleles, like blood type. Okay, and within a given population, okay, the frequencies of given alleles are going to vary. Okay, in some cases it's going to be 50-50. Some cases it's going to be skewed more this way or this way here. But there are going to be differing frequencies of alleles within a population. Okay, and there are a few ways to introduce new alleles into a population. One is just migration. Okay, individuals will come into a population, they'll go out of another population, they'll kind of go back and forth. New alleles can come about that way. We get it through crossing over. We talked about that previously. I believe that was in our last in-person class. And also we'll get new alleles sometimes through mutation. Okay? Now, we talked about this before. Here again, every person in seeing this has, on average, 2 mutations. Okay, it's not necessarily a death sentence. Okay, in most cases, you are going to have some kind of lethal mutation in there. In most cases, the mutation is going to be a bad thing, but those people don't get born. Sometimes it's something inconsequential. Most time, if the person or organism survives, it's going to be inconsequential. Maybe in my hair was supposed to be slightly less brown or more brown. Maybe my eyes were supposed to be a different shade. Something like that. Something doesn't really matter. Occasionally, though, guys, you're going to get a mutation that is actually beneficial. Okay, that could be something like going back to our giraffe. Maybe early on, the ancestor of the giraffe up there had a mutation where its neck was longer. Okay. And over time, the ones that were able to reach the higher leaves, well, that a trait was selected for. And over time, the neck, it just got longer and longer. Okay? And so that led to the evolution. It led to a marked preference for that particular allele, led to a change in that allele frequency. But guys, changes in the frequency of an allele within a gene pool, that's all the genes that are available in a population. Guys, that's what we call microevolution. Okay? It's just simple changes in gene frequency. And these changes can be due to random chance. Okay? And that's especially common in your smaller populations. It could just be some sort of random thing in there. If you've got a population of less than 100 individuals, just sheer random happenstance is going to play a much larger role than it would in, say, a million individuals. Okay, could be due to some sort of selection pressure, either for or against a certain allele. Okay, we'll talk about that here in just a bit. Or could it be, could it be some combination? Now, your modes of natural selection. Okay, you got three basic types. You've got directional selection, you got stabilizing selection, you have disruptive selection. Let's look on 215. Okay, directional selection. Okay, is you're going to go basically if you have a range of phenotypes, if you have a range of characteristics. Okay, directional selection is going to push it in one direction or the other. Okay, think of a good example here. Back at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, okay, late 1700s, early 1800s. Okay, they didn't have environmental regulations like we do now. So the areas around the factories would be covered in this black soot. Okay, this is observed over in England. They had a little species called a pepper moth. Okay, and this moth basically had two types. It had a white speckled with black type. That's why it was called pepper, and that was the main type. That was the predominant type. And the other kind would occasionally come out with just completely black wings. Okay, and at the time, prior to the Industrial Revolution, prior to all the black soot being everywhere, okay, in nature, black is going to stick out like a sore thumb. You're trying to blend into vegetation. Okay, you would much rather be white with little black speckles. You can blend in versus this solid black. Well, suddenly the soot that comes in, everything's black. Suddenly, it's not particularly advantageous whatsoever to be a white moth when everything is black. You stick out like a sore thumb, and you're not reproducing. And all of a sudden, they almost all the pepper moth that's for black. So that is directional selection. Okay. And you've got stabilizing selection. You'll see that on 215. Okay. Let's think about our Darwin's finches again, or the Galapagos. Okay. Maybe, no, excuse me. I got ahead of myself there. We're going to come back to those finches. Stabilizing selection. Favor the middle of a range. Okay. Think of deer. Okay. Deer. Okay. The does are going to prefer your stags with the biggest racks. Okay, they're going to want the biggest set of antlers there's available. Okay, not only is it sexual selection on the doe's part, but the bigger rack actually helps the stag there to fend off any challengers. Okay. Thing is, though, does are not the only ones that want a good rack here. Okay, it is also hunters. Hunter has a choice between a 10-point buck, 10-point duck, yeah, that's quarantine. But anyway, have a choice between a 10-point buck and a 3-point buck. Well, they're going to go for that 10-pointer. Okay, so they're at the point here where if the rack gets too big, the hunters are going to get them. And you've also got, as a side note, if the rack gets too big, they're not going to be able to hold their heads up there. So, got to kind of select against that and on that end too. So you don't want it too big on one end. Get it too small, well, they're going to survive, but they're not going to be passing their genes on because all the does are going to be, doing whatever the deer equivalent of an eye roll is and going on into the 10-pointer. So what's going to happen is the two extremes, they're not going to have a lot of survival. They're not going to be passing their genes on. The guys in the middle, those are the ones that are going to be passing things on. So that's stabilizing selection. So now we'll go back to Darwin's finches and we'll talk about disruptive selection. Okay, that is where the middle is excluded, but the two extremes. Okay, think of Darwin's finches. Okay, got flower here, big, big crisp, hard to crack seeds, a big pistil right in the middle there. Pistil being the middle part of the flower, if those don't know. And what's going to happen in here is that the ones whose beaks are really small, they're going to be able to get in, they're going to be able to pick those seeds out. They're just going to be able to surgically get in like tweezers. Okay, they're going to be able to pick around all the obstacles. They're going to be able to get those seeds. The pistil, well, they're going to get around it. The ones with the great big beaks, they're just going to chomp, and they're going to just get everything there, spit that pistil out, swallow, whatever. They don't care. They're going to get what they need. Guys is in the middle. The ones whose beaks are too big to get in between and around, but not strong enough to just chomp, they're out of luck. So selection is going to favor the extremes. It's not going to favor them. Okay. Yeah. There. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I love some of the labels on these things. Survival of the sexiest. Okay, I like to talk about. A lot of species, is there are humans among them, they will, practice sexual selection. One sex or the other. Usually the females are the ones that are picky in the animal kingdom, but there are exceptions. Usually either one sex or the other is going to have, a preference. Okay? And that's going to lead into evolution there. It's going to lead to the X of the antlers there. It's going to lead to, the more ostentatious plumage on your birds, like the peacock or some of your birds of paradise or whatever. It's going to lead to various courtship behaviors. Okay? There's a lot of birds there will bring in their perspective made of rock. And, there's more than one, I guess. She'll go with the one that does the bigger rock or whatever. But there is sexual selection. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So be aware of that. 219 talks about maintaining multiple alleles. Okay. In a lot of cases, there are, again, and like the blood type, it doesn't really matter for the most part, things like that. In some cases, though, multiple alleles can actually kind of be harmful. Okay, classic example here is hemophilia. Okay, hemophilia, and for those who don't know, it's a disease. Excuse me, not hemophilia. Okay. Long week, long quarantine, whatever. Okay, sickle cell anemia, not hemophilia. My apologies. Sickle cell anemia. Okay, that is a disease where your red blood cells, instead of being these nice round kind of donut-shaped things, they'll get this kind of crescent-shaped, shriveled up thing. They'll look like sickles. They'll be shriveled up there. They won't carry oxygen very well. It's a very painful, very debilitating disease. Okay? And so you may ask, okay, it's harmful, it's debilitating. Why is it persistent? Well, the reason for that is that, okay, we talked previously about hybrid vigor. Okay, you have individuals that have two dominant alleles for just regular red blood cells. Okay, they're going to be fine. Ones that have two recessive alleles for sickle cell anemia, they are going to be, they're going to have an issue. They may die. They're not going to be functioning as well, regardless. Okay. The heterozygotes, the ones that have one dominant and one recessive, though, they have an advantage there because they've got that dominant allele to not have it, and it's not going to be producing quite as many good red blood cells there. You might have a few like this sneak in, but most of them are going to be good right here. But it's going to be good enough to function. Plus, the heterozygotes actually have a resistance to malaria, which it's in a lot of areas, it's a very serious issue on its own right. So that's why a lot of times these things will persist. Okay, and again, in genetic drift, things due to random chance. Sometimes these things just get through. Okay. Okay. All right. Genetic drift. We just talked about that. Okay. Okay. A few other special cases. Okay. Let's look on 220. The bottleneck effect and the founder effect. Okay. These are some special circumstances where a situation may not always line up with what's expected. Okay. A bottleneck. That is a circumstance. Usually some sort of catastrophe. Okay. Let's say you've got a population in an area, and there is a volcanic eruption, let's say. Okay. And the ones that get through that disaster, okay, we call stochastic, which is just a fancy word of saying random. They survive stochastically. And they're going to get through. And the ones that survive this bottleneck, they may or may not have the strongest genetic makeup. They may not have the ideal ones, but that's what made it through. Okay, so that's a bottleneck. Okay, another situation, the founder effect. Okay, that is where, or again, our population goes to a new area. Let's say that, okay, I don't know if we have any left-handers in this class, but I'm left-handed. Okay, and let's say that all the left-handers in town would say, okay, enough already. Okay, we live in a world where everything is backward. Okay, these things, backward. Okay, you have to go and buy a special pair or left-handed scissors. I don't know if they still have those green-handled ones in elementary school or not, but when I was in school, they did. And I got tired of looking for the one pair of green-handled scissors that would actually work or didn't get worn out and didn't have those stupid rounded tips and everything. So I finally made my dad go and buy me my own pair. And he engraved my name in them too. You know, I did not put the Social Security number in that. We're past that by then. But no comments for the peanut gallery over here. But anyway, I'm getting a look. But we get tired or living in a world dominated by right-handers, where the only thing that favors us is the toll booth. We say, the heck with this, we're getting out of here, or who's with me, let's go. Left on, all right? Now, we go on, and we set up on an island somewhere, and we go about our merry way. Come back 500 years later. Leftopia. Okay? 95% of us are left-handed. Okay? Now, we do not match the population at large. Okay? The population at large, only about 1 person in 10 is left-handed. Okay? But Leftopia here, we've isolated ourselves, we've gone about the area. Population is going to have the characteristics of the people that found it. And that's the founder effect. Okay? You got to worry too about inbreeding. Okay, if you got a small population that doesn't really bring in new members there to intermingle with, after enough generations, you're going to start to see a prevalence of recessive traits that will be balanced out in a larger population. Okay, you see groups like the Amish, the Mennonites, some other groups there. Where they don't really have a large population with which they'll breed, and you'll start seeing a lot of genetic issues. Okay, now your gene flow. Again, it's just the flow of genes between populations. So now we get into the concept of macroevolution. Microevolution being, gene changes within a population. Singular. Macroevolution, changes in genetics between multiple populations. And this is going to ultimately lead to speciation, the formation of new species. Okay, and the first thing that has to happen for that is that your populations have to be isolated, and not just isolated, but they have to be reproductively isolated. That means that they're not breeding with each other. Okay, and we'll talk about the reasons for that in just a second here. But first, we need to kind of go over again what is a species. Now, this is Bio 112. Okay, and my grad school days in Bio 850. Okay, we had a class-long discussion slash argument, I guess you could say, about what constitutes a species. And we really had not a lot of success there. We didn't really come up with a decent answer to that question. Okay, the definition that I'm going to give you here, and the definition that is commonly used, okay, in the laboratories, and you look at genetic situations and that, it's sort of a, but okay, for our purposes today here, I want you all to understand that when we say the two organisms are members of the same species, okay, what has to happen is that these two will mate, they produce offspring, and those offspring themselves are fertile. In other words, those offspring could themselves have offspring. Okay, horse and a donkey, they can have offspring together. They can have a mule. That mule is going to be sterile. It cannot reproduce. That's why the horse and the donkey are said to be in two different species. And you could think of it, I guess, as sort of nature's, fail-safe, I guess. It's just to make sure that this can't happen or shouldn't happen. Okay? And so that leads us back to reproductive isolation. There are a number of things that could lead to reproductive isolation. Could be just a physical or geographical barrier. Okay, maybe something happened that this population over here, or maybe they floated in on on a log or something, and they're on an island, they can't swim. Or maybe there's a barrier. Okay, and sometimes a barrier, guys, doesn't even have to be that much of a barrier, because okay, even with birds, my research was on the loggerhead shrike, which can fly. But I mean, you could put a road right in the middle of their habitat, and they're going to abandon that habitat because even though they can fly, they can just fly right across that road. That's for whatever reason, and for them, they'll consider that habitat to be barred or fragmented. They won't be able to use it. So, physical isolation. Okay, behaviors. Maybe this population over here comes out in the daytime. This one only comes out at night. Maybe this one has eventually evolved up to the point where they're sexually selective. This one isn't. Could be something like that. It could be a physical thing. Okay, I have a belief here, or that eventually the animals that we call dogs are eventually going to end up being considered to be separate species. Okay, you can imagine a Great Dane and a Chihuahua. You can imagine what would happen if they try to mate. Okay, that's either tragedy or comedy, depending on your perspective. So, well, there could be physical issues along that way, but for whatever reason, they are not going to mate, and so they are reproductively isolated. And then at that point, this population, mutation here, here, they keep going. This population here, they're going to start mutating off eventually, and they're going to split off and off and off and off and off and off until eventually they're so different that they just cannot have fertile offspring anymore. And at that point, those are new species. Okay? A couple types of speciation on 224. Allopatric speciation, that's speciation going on in different areas. Okay, like the island versus the mainland. Sympatric would be they're in the same area, but they're just not interacting for whatever reason. Again, one comes out at night, one comes out at day. One lives at the top of the tree, one lives at the bottom of the tree. Who knows? Okay. All right. So those are just examples there. Okay. And so that again, that just leads into macroevolution, which is just evolution on a larger scale. Okay. Which eventually leads into speciation. Okay. Okay, look on 226. By current estimates, more than 99% of all species are now extinct. Okay. Several million years ago, I'd have to look up exactly how many millions of years ago, but look at the fossil record there. It's all trilobites. Trilobites were the dominant species on Earth. And then after a mass extinction in there, which happened every several million years, they just weren't there anymore. Okay. Things do change. Okay. And there's any number of causes for it. It's habitat changing environment. Okay. Natural disaster. Okay. Adaptive radiation, and we saw that with Darwin's finches. You can see that there on 227. Basically, they all have a common ancestor, and they all radiate out like spokes on a wheel. And you can see examples of that with the finches and their beaks. Okay. All right. Let's look on 228. Okay. Coevolution. Okay. Think of a biological arms race. Okay. Fox and a rabbit. Okay. Rabbit loses the race to the fox. That rabbit's not going to be passing on its genes. Okay. So eventually the rabbits, the slow ones are going to get eaten, the fast one and survive. Now the rabbit's faster than the fox. Okay. Fox doesn't eat the rabbit, fox is going to starve. So the fox has to get faster. That means the rabbit's going to get faster, fox gets faster, and so on. So they evolve kind of together in response to each other. And okay, you'll see that that's one form. Others have evolved to a more, agreeable circumstance, like lichen. All your lichens, that is a fungus and an algae. They've evolved to exist together. Or things like your clownfish and your sea anemone, where they've evolved to rely on each other. That's all coevolution. Okay. Last thing here. Look on 229. Okay, you can see the cladogram. That's like a family tree, and that is going to be showing in the common ancestors. Okay, look there, you'll see. See the earthworm, tuna, turtle, lizard, mouse, and human. They've all got a common ancestor there, and you can see that the further back the common ancestor there is, the more distantly related they are. Think of it just like you would a family tree. Okay. And I believe we're good to go. Okay. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or email. I'll have, or text. Thank you. Or I will have I'll have your grades to you hopefully by tomorrow. Okay. Have a good day.